My first area was called Loma Pata, which is the area along the border of Asuncion and the next city to the north. They've kind of just melted together, so you can't really tell where the border is. But yeah, that was in Asuncion. We had like 4 supermarkets in our area and a dollar store, or the Paraguayan equivalent. So Asuncion is fairly developed. They've got more sidewalks and more asphalt and stuff like that than most other cities do. My particular area was a labyrinth of streets. You could like turn left 3 times and then come to a dead end. Everywhere in Paraguay, the #1 mode of transportation is bus. That is how you get everywhere. Very few people own cars. People who do own a form of transportation it's usually a motorcycle, and even then they probably take the bus a lot. Even a lot of wealthier people just take the bus. Sometimes the buses get crowded, and sometimes they run a little bit late or they break down, so you always have to get on the bus earlier than you want to in order to make it to where you're going. Let's see. Oh, and housing. So there's like no zoning laws that I know of in Paraguay, so sometimes you can find an apartment building next to a small single-story house, next to a 2-story house, and like you can have a mansion next to a shack, and it's just completely normal. As far as like what people do for fun, typically they what they really like to do is listen to loud music, not necessarily like rock music, but just like they turn up the music really loud, and they sit in a circle passing a cup of tereré in between themselves. Tereré is like this cold tea stuff. People who don't own a house and like don't own a house or don't own land and can't really afford to buy the land, they often kind of like homestead, where the government like designates a certain patch of land where that the owner has officially recognized as not actually needing, or something like that, and you just like build a little shanty on a small patch of land there, and next to a bunch of other shanties, and it becomes something called an asentamiento. Sometimes you can find a good humble person to teach in an asentamiento, but sometimes they've got some weird rules that you have to work around. They also speak a lot of this language called Guarani, which is native to South America, and it's really useful to learn Guarani because people speak Spanish half the time and Guarani half the time, and they'll just mix it all together. They call the mix between the two Jopara. That's what most people speak, unless they're really rich and really businesslike, and then they stick with English and Spanish. There was a leather worker in that area that I probably should have asked to make one of those scripture covers, because scripture covers are really popular, and the members who make scripture covers are so completely overwhelmed that if you ask them for one at the beginning of your mission, you might be lucky if you get it at the end.
It's called Itagua, and it's literally known as the Ciudad de Ñanduti. And Ñanduti is this cultural clothing type of clothing that they have in Paraguay. So what it really is, it's when people, they knit like certain designs into the clothing or ties or dresses, and they do these these designs to give it a more of like a piece of their culture into it. So Itagua is known for that. It's everywhere. Like Nyandu tea shops are, there's a whole strip of just like 5 stores back to back, all selling the same thing. And so that's a really big thing that Itagua sells. It's also really good with pizza. I don't know why, but that was my first area that I went to that there was a lot of pizza, and I was like, this is great. I haven't had pizza in like a year because all my other areas didn't have any. And so that was a really big food thing that they had in Itagua. It was a little bit also a lot more, and it looked like, one of my friends said it looked like a downtown Provo, where like the main stores were. And now being in Provo, I can see like that feel. So it was definitely one of my nicer areas. Itagua was beautiful. It was one of my favorite areas too. I was also there for 6 months. It was the longest I had been in an area until then. So the members there were amazing. A lot of them work in Itagua itself, or the furthest they will go, I think, is San Lorenzo. And San Lorenzo is like a 30-minute bus ride to south. So most of them will work in Itagua itself. It's a big enough town, it's a big enough city to just maintain itself. There are supermarkets there are clothing stores, there's fast food places, there's the houses are a lot nicer. It's not until you start going deeper into Itagua that you start to find like the houses inside of like jungles. So there's places called asentamientos and conabis. So they're government owned property that they give to the citizens of Paraguay. If you're a Paraguayan, you just sign up, and if you qualify, they give you a house, and you basically like pay it off little by little by small fees. But it's a house that's constructed with land, which are the conabis, and asentamientos are pieces of land. You still have to construct your own house, but they give you the land, so you have something to build on. So those were two of the further away places. So if it was Itagua, it'd be the center, and then Conavi would be in the south of it, and Asentamiento would be in the north of it. So they were very far away from where the center was, so they were a lot more poor. To get to the Asentamiento, I remember we would cross a cattle farm. I remember when I first got there, I asked my companions, like, is this illegal? Like, is this trespassing? And he just turned around and he said, it's Paraguay, nothing's illegal here. I was like, okay, sure. So we're like walking through like a forest. Literally, it looks like a forest or a jungle. There are trees everywhere, and I can't see the path anymore. He just knows where to go. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like this does not look like the center anymore. Like this is not Itagua. And he's like, no, don't worry. Like we're still in Itagua. We're still in our area. And we're walking, and then we go under a fence, and there's just wheat everywhere and cattle. And I don't like cows. I'm scared of cows, actually. So I had to get used to them. And there was one point where they were like all herd together where we had to exit out so we could get to the actual asentamiento. And my companion would always just go in front of me and just like put up his hand, and they would just leave, like just like be gone. And that was really funny because how that worked. And then we would get to the actual asentamiento. So when you go there, you can definitely feel the poverty, like that there's a higher poverty there, as opposed to when you're in the center itself. As well as Conavi is kind of more like the Chuchi high-end version of asentamientos, because even though they're government-owned, they still give them a house. Asentamientos, you don't get a house. You have to build it. So there's a lot of like wooden plank houses or like plastic wrap houses or banner houses. Like it was really interesting. They would take banners that supermarkets would make, like huge advertising banners, take them and put 4 sticks and wrap it around, and then they would go inside and that would be their house. So it was a very big difference. And in Conavi, they would give them material houses. Like it would be made out of material. It would have a roof. It'd have a kitchen. It'd have a small kitchen with the dining area together and 2 rooms and a bathroom. And the bathroom would be on the inside. So Conavis were a lot nicer, but it was also really far. There was one bus that came like every 15, 20 minutes that would take you from the center to Conavi. So there were days where my companion and I it would be no point. I think we'd spend the same amount of time walking to the Conavi as waiting for the bus. So it was a really big area. Itagua is huge. Itagua was one of, I think, the biggest area I had on my mission. It used to be split up into four, and by the time I had left, it was two, and it was big enough with four. Um, so yeah, it was one of my nicer areas. It was one of my safer areas as well for the most part. There wasn't a lot of danger. There wasn't a lot of things that were going around like my other area had been. Everything was very calm. We could walk. I remember we were coming home one night, and it was usually 9 o'clock is when you should, like, for sure for some of my areas. But this one was like if we got out of a lesson and we were gonna make that 9:30 time, then it would still be fine. It would be quiet. Like no one would be out. Like it was definitely a safer part of the air of my mission. I felt safer. There were some areas where I didn't feel safe, where even like at 8:30 I was like, oh, like looking around because it felt sketchy. But Itagua definitely was not one of them. Itagua was definitely a really nice, really well kept, I think, city. We had a lot of they call them librerias. I don't know why, because libraries aren't supposed to sell books. They just sell like school supplies. They had a bunch of school supplies, places that they sold. They had a lot of places to use computers as well. They had three major ones, and that were really nice. One of the nicer places to use the computer. So it was overall, I think Itagua was just like a really nice area. So it was a really nice city. It was my favorite. I'd go back. I think I even said when someone asked me, of all your areas, which one would you move to? I said Itagua, just because it's so commercialized. It's so nice. It has everything basically. It has your supermarket. It has your clothing stores. It has jobs. It has banks galore. It has banks everywhere. The transportation is really good too. All the major colectivos, buses go through there. So in general, it was, I think, my favorite. I got sent to Concepcion in the summer. So Paraguay is really hot in general. Really hot, really humid country. And as you go further into the country, towards the center of the country, it gets hotter. And Concepcion was one of, I think, the second hottest place in Paraguay besides the Chaco. And the only difference between the Chaco was just that it was across the river, and I could see it from my area. So I had just got sent there in the summer, so it was really hot. I remember getting off and it's 6 or 7 hours away from Asuncion. So we got on a double-decker bus, and we went 7 hours riding on that double-decker bus all the way out there. And so you were really far away. You are very secluded. It's very hot. It was in the summer, so it was even hotter. Concepcion itself, the center, obviously, I feel like the center is always the nicest, right? It's always going to be the center where it's more commercialized. It has the supermarkets, it has the bank, it has all the things you kind of need. And then it's not until you get to the outskirts of it that it gets kind of like sketchy. So I was in Rama Uno. So there's 3 ramas, or 3 branches. So I was in the first branch, which was in the center, but I still had I basically had the whole river. So like I had said, usually when you're by the river, it's not nice. They're not nice areas. And the biggest threat, I think, that everyone always talked about was the river overflowing. Everyone always talked about it, and it actually happened while I was there, and half my area was underwater on the second day that I was there. I went, and my companion was showing me around, and we went to a despensa, or like a little market house thing, and the water was up to the roof. Like you could only see the roof of the despensa, and I was like, oh my goodness, like how are we gonna work in this area? Like how are we gonna, like half these people, I don't know where they are, and it was half of our map literally was underwater. So Concepcion was really interesting. A lot of the people there, because it's so far away from the center, a lot of people speak Guarani there. People speak Spanish. People will always speak Spanish, and I like to say in Guarani, it's like se hacen el tiempo tabú, like they pretend not to know Spanish, and they kind of just look at you and they're like, they don't respond until you say something in Guarani, and they're just like, oh, okay, like now we can have a conversation, and you slowly start to realize that their Guarani turns into Spanish. But it's definitely one of those places where Guarani is mostly spoken. There's a lot of Guarani speakers there. All the members kind of want you to learn Guarani, and it's definitely a place where you want members to come because of that Guarani factor, so they can kind of help you out with learning what they're saying or helping translate so they can understand. It's also a bit of a poorer area. There's also an asentamiento out there that's called Calabarita, and that's a little bit that's basically the place where it was all underwater. So typically those are the places that are not the nicest, because you can't build a good house because it's always getting knocked down whenever it floods, and it floods almost every summer or every time like the rain season comes in. And so Concepcion had that going for it. I was also there when there was a lot of dengue going around. So dengue is a disease you get like from the mosquitoes, and there are mosquitoes galore in Concepcion, way more than any of my other areas. I remember the mission president and his wife like emphasizing a lot, use bug repellent, because there's a lot of missionaries who are getting dengue, and like it's really bad. And there was a lot just going on in Concepcion. I think while I was there, I remember we went to sing Christmas carols at the hospital there, and half of the people there had dengue. That's why they were in the hospital. They were receiving so many and so many and so many. So that was really fun, trying to worry about not getting dengue, or trying to worry about like, oh, did I put on bug repellent today? I also couldn't walk to the corner without sweating. I think that's where I was the tannest and where I was the skinniest of my entire mission, because it was so hot. It was so hot. I remember like I would wear my sombrero every day. Like it was not it was not a thing where it was like, should I wear my sombrero today? It seems like it's like a lot of sun. Like I wore it because the beaming it hit you so much. Like you just felt it melting you. And just walking down the stairs of our apartment, I was sweating. I was already drenched in sweat. And by the time I got to the corner, I was like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. It's so hot. And the straps on my sombrero started changing color because of the sweat, and it was leather, or like fake leather. So like it started changing the color of it. So it was pretty interesting. There's a lot of stray horses as well. I don't know why. In all the other parts of Paraguay, there are stray dogs. In Concepcion, there are stray horses. I remember walking and just like 4 horses running towards us, and like we're walking the other way, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what do I do? What do I do? And my companion's just like, let's just move to the side. Okay. So he just moved to the side and had these 4 horses just run past us. And I asked him, is this normal? Like, does this usually happen? He's like, yeah, there are horses everywhere. And then I started figuring out there were horses. They were like the dogs. They were the stray dogs. They'd be eating the garbage. They'd be walking around the streets. They're the ones running around. And that was very interesting for me, because I had seen horses in Paraguay, but usually they belonged to someone. These were just stray horses, and they would just be everywhere. I think I was more scared of getting hit by a horse than getting attacked by an actual person or by a car or anything. There are no colectivos in Concepcion either. Everything is done walking. Everything, you either walk, you have a car, or you use a donkey taxi, a donkey cab. So it's literally just like a carriage, and a donkey pulls it. You just go in the carriage, and it pulls you however far the guy wants to go, because it's not like an official thing. It's just, I think, something that the missionaries came up with because they were the ones who used it. But yeah, so there are no colectivos. So you can't just get on a bus that'll take you to one part of your area like everywhere else. Here was, if you had to walk, you had to walk, and we had to walk. It was really, really far to get to the other missionaries. Since it was just one zone there, those are the only people you communicate with, because we're so far away to go anywhere else and meet anyone else. So the missionaries are there. You get to know them really, really well. Doing divisions and having to walk to the other branch, So Rama Tres was very far away. It was, oh my goodness. I remember walking it for a baptismal interview, and it was so far. I was so tired when I got there, and that's how they maneuver themselves. Like a lot of the times, the missionaries have to walk like a couple of kilometers to even just go to the supermarket on a P day, because they live so far away from it, and there's no bus, there's no transportation. So I think that's why they came up with the whole donkey cab thing. They would see the donkeys pulling the carts and be like, hey, how far will you get me if I give you like 2 mil guaranis? It's like, all right, well, I can take you somewhere. And they would get on and go. And other missionaries were just really unlucky and just had to carry their groceries anyway. And it's pretty weird. Going into the interior, going into the in-depth one, I don't know how to say that, but going further into the country, definitely way different than the center. That's kind of what I realized. The language is a lot more Guarani than it is Spanish. There's no colectivos, stray horses, and it's a lot hotter.